I've never been much of a fan of Donald Trump personally. He lives in a different orbit than I do, and I just didn't care for how he handled himself or what he was involved in. It just didn't matter to me, didn't affect me. But of course, when he rode down the escalator, like every other American, all of a sudden Trump was thrust front and center into the world of politics at the national level, the world level, in a sense, as a candidate for the presidency of America after storming through the 2016 primaries leading up to the election of 2016. President Trump became president by defeating Hillary Clinton, who I was certainly not inclined to vote for. And as has been noted by many others, we have an either or choice when it comes to voting for the president on the first week of November. And so, in selecting uh, President Trump as president 2016, America was off on an adventure that, in many ways, seemed centered on turning Washington upside down and destroying norms, some of which I agreed with, some of which I questioned. Ultimately, by the time President Trump's presidency concluded, the onslaught of COVID and how he handled that was too much to overcome in the election. Not getting into any of the debates surrounding how the election actually took place in 2020, Trump lost. And the way he handled that loss set the stage, I would suggest, for Georgia having two Democrat senators instead of two Republican, or at least one Republican and one Democrat senator, which would have left Republicans in control of the Senate at the end of the 2020 election. So things turned out as they did. Frankly, I was hoping that President Trump was done, not because I didn't agree with things that he did. In fact, some of the things that he did made me think about issues in ways I hadn't thought before and changed my mind on a couple of things. But as so many have noted, while he had a message that resonated with many, the messenger got in the way of that message way too often. And that continues to be the case, no less so, in fact, perhaps even more so now as we move into the 2024 election, the final few weeks of the 2024 election cycle. I've wondered over the last 3.5+ years why Republicans kept calling for President Biden to step down or to be set aside, given that Vice President Kamala Harris was waiting in the wings to take over, given that so many people suggested that she was less qualified than President Biden to serve as Commander in Chief and President of the United States based on her past political activity and success, or lack of success, perhaps we should say. Perhaps in complaining about President Biden the way they did, Republicans expected something very different than what happened with respect to finding a replacement. Having marched through the quote Democratic primary and winning the delegates there, or securing the delegates, pending the confirmation at the convention, President Biden, of course, had his disastrous debate performance, where finally the media and Democrats themselves began to speak against him serving. Maybe Republicans expected the Democratic Party to continue in a state of chaos for the next 100 days or so, as they saw repeatedly Democrat leaders and the media speaking against Vice President Kamala Harris and the likelihood of her success on the national stage as a presidential candidate. However, things have coalesced around Vice President Harris to the point that she is now leading in virtually all the polls against President Trump. And former President Trump is now looking like the old man who is increasingly out of touch with the direction of the country, or out of touch with an ability to lead the country in the direction that he thinks it ought to go. His most recent statement about AI generated crowds for Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign stops suggests someone who is not only increasingly unhinged, shall we say, but who simply doesn't understand the direction that technology is going. And the idea that President Trump can actually lead for the next 4 years is increasingly being scrutinized, and doubt on that idea is being cast by former President Trump himself. So as we enter into the final stretch of the 2024 campaign, who knows what's going to happen next? But until Vice President Harris is actually asked questions by the media and engages with President Trump in a debate, there's no suggestion that the momentum she has is going to slow down until former President Trump gets a hold of himself and actually deals with issues over personal vendettas, with policies over diatribes about the unfairness of events in the past. There's little hope that Republicans are going to be able to turn things around. And so hopefully better heads will prevail on all sides, and we will actually have serious policy issues being discussed, even though the representatives, the messengers for those policies on both sides, may not be the preferred candidate for either party. Certainly, Democrats at the moment have the upper hand. Thank you all very much. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. Bye bye. Thank you very much for your time. I've got a couple other videos listed here if you'd like to take a look at those. And as I'd like to discuss issues related to politics, religion, society, and how in the world we're supposed to understand ourselves and life in the world. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye bye.